Yeah, hi, my name is Nils. I'm from Hadid Architects in London, and we are probably by now what I would describe an old school competition office. We have been doing competitions since day one, and for many, many years, nothing else, because it was very hard to win, and that's really the nature of winning work as an architect. Most of the times, you don't. And I start with a build project, even though this is about UNBUILT, because it took Zaha 13 years to get her first project built. So this was the Vitar fire station, finished in 1993. Zaha started her work in 1979. This was project number 901. So she built an enormous body of work trying to get her idea of architecture into the built world, winning quite early. This is an architectural drawing. Zaha didn't like to be referred to as an artist. The project, I don't know whether you spotted this up here, that's the peak in Hong Kong. She won that in 1980. Didn't get to build it. This is a project she did in 1985. It's called Grand Buildings Trafalgar Square. The project is hiding somewhere up there in the corner. And then for many, many years, she would produce this really fantastic work. This is a proposal for the development of Madrid, Vision for Madrid from 1992, without getting the opportunity to get something into the ground. And this was a competition she won in 1994, very famously the Cardiff Opera House, which then basically got stopped dead in its track by the British establishment, deeming it too risky to give it to her. Then eventually smaller projects would pop up. This is now 1998, so 20 years after she started her work, you would see projects of this scale. This is LF1, a pavilion, again in Germany, very near her first built project, and over the years this would start to become the way the office worked, right? So you would develop proposal after proposal, and we still do that today. We're now 530 architects. We still win 65% of our work through competitions. That means at any given time in our office you will have at least 100 people working on them, and by now we have a win rate of about 1 in 3, which is quite high, and that's because we can choose very well now where we participate and where we don't. But in the beginning, that was absolutely not a given, and it was the same for everyone else. So it was a lot of hard work. But the interesting thing is that over those years, the office became an expert in almost any typology, because there was nothing that wouldn't be tried or challenged. And like, be it unbuilt theaters, in this case, this was one for Amman, or an attempt to win the National Museum of Art in China, many unbuilt towers, then slightly more ambitious unbuilt towers, then slightly crazy unbuilt towers, and then really interesting ones. This one we even had fully engineered and got very close to it. But over the years, there was basically an exploration in almost any typology you could think. This is a proposal for a church in Copenhagen, proposal for a university building in Cyprus, the Dubai Opera House, which we won, that then ended in 2008 when Dubai ran out of money. The Tokyo National Stadium that we won for the 2020 Olympics that turned into the 2021 ones, eventually deemed a political problem to have a non-Japanese architect building it. And we did master plans, entire cities that weren't built, islands that weren't built, airports that weren't built. And over the years, we really developed a quite thorough expertise in almost anything that you could think of as a building. And then all of a sudden, weird things happen, like the first airport that we win is the world's largest terminal. So this is, we never built an airport before, but as we were so immersed into the subject matter, we could win people over to do this with us. And apparently we got a convincing scheme together. Why do I talk about mosques today? And it's for two reasons. First of all, mosques are one of the typologies that Zaha has been working on for many, many years, and she never really hacked her way through it. So she never built a mosque in her life, and there are quite a lot of proposals out there. And the second reason is that the project that I'm going to talk about later has been almost talked into existence by a Kosovarian architect, Vikim Ramko, who was a student at the AA in London when, at the time, Zaha was teaching there. And he's now working in Kosovo and is trying to convince international architects to come in there and make proposals to build in the country. And there's a lot to do there. And he convinced Zaha to participate in a competition for a mosque in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, and that's why I've picked that project. And he pointed me then at this event, saying it might be a good idea or a good opportunity to perhaps showcase it. It's this project here. It's a proposal we made in 2013 as part of an open international competition, almost 100 submissions. But the first mosque that Zaha looked into is this project here. So this was a design proposal for a mosque in Strasbourg in year 2000. And quite interestingly, it's the only design that doesn't have a minaret. So it's still very much kind of grounded in the territory, as a lot of Zaha's early work. It kind of develops itself out of the landscape, and you see how the main prayer hall is folded out of the ground. And then 3 years later, she worked on this study here, which was a commission for a privately funded but public mosque in Doha, in Qatar. And you see what starts to happen here. The landscape folds up a bit. You have kind of an emerging minaret. And this is, of course, very different from, let's say, the kind of box standard diagram you have in mind for a mosque, which is a big box with a prayer hall, maybe a cupola on top, maybe a minaret, and then some auxiliary functions aside to it. But if you actually look into mosques a bit deeper, you see that's an incredibly polymorph typology, right? I mean, I think everyone kind of has images like these probably in mind, which is the Hagia Sophia, which is interesting at its core, a Byzantine basilica that got converted after almost 1,000 years into a mosque by adding a few minarets to it. But then 100 years later, it got replaced by the Sultan Ahmed Mosque in Istanbul as the new main mosque of the Ottoman Empire, and interestingly kind of emerged from that Byzantine typology. Whereas if you go back, and this is probably the oldest photo of an old mosque, which is the Quba Mosque, which got demolished at the beginning of the 20th century. So this was contemporary to Prophet Muhammad. The oldest picture of a mosque you can probably get hold of, which is actually a four-walled building with a tower to it. So very different from the stereotype that you might have in mind. And this actually emerged from the typology of a riad, which is just kind of a typical Arab house. Quite interesting is what happened during the Umayyad period. This is the Mezquita Mosque in Cordoba. Again, a very different typology. It's a big hall, kind of extended, and then almost inverse to what happened with the Hagia Sophia. Eventually, after the Reconquista, it was converted into a cathedral that was then built into the soil, but you have this kind of big walled building with an asymmetric minaret to it, colonnades that are quite a dominant element there. And also this is a mosque, quite interesting. So this is the Al-Karouan University in Fez, in Morocco. It's a madrasa mosque with a school attached. It's the oldest operating university in the world. It beats Bologna by 200 years, despite common belief. And this thing basically grew into the city, and you don't know that you're there before you're standing literally in front of the gate. So it's almost like a building turned city. And then, of course, the Grand Mosque in Mecca. This is the fourth Saudi extension to it. It starts to really grow into the city. And this is a proposal that Zaha made in 2008. That was during the phase of the third extension, Saudi extension to the Grand Mosque, and a study for the fifth extension, commissioned to look into the future of how a city and mosque could expand to accommodate for more and more pilgrimage there. Foster and Partner was also involved with the urban design study for that. So that's basically the mosque taking over the city at enormous scale. Very different scale. It's a project dating back to 2009, commissioned for a project in Qatar. Was meant to be a kind of a new mall commercial development, a new neighborhood. They needed a small neighborhood mosque. Very different scale, 700 square meters. Not realized. A competition in Tirana for a mosque and religious culture museum. So there is a secular part of the project, which is what you see on the left, and then there is the mosque building, which you see to the right. Coming together in one complex in the city. International competition got a lot of attention. Project didn't go ahead. Winning scheme that's not by us. This is by BIC. A very strong diagram, kind of ripping through the site and opening up. But unfortunately, that project didn't go ahead. This is a proposal we did in 2017, kind of looking at kind of kind of light structural shells for a mosque at the Dubai Creek Harbor. Also didn't happen. Very different typology what you've seen before. It's a comparably large building with a big prayer room. And then this is one of the most recent ones we've looked into is the restoration of the Al-Nuri mosque in Mosul in Iraq that got destroyed in 2014 in conflict between ISIS and American troops. So this is a refurbishment project. But again, we didn't win it. But what's quite interesting here, you have a very different typology for the prayer hall that you saw before. So again, a very, very different typology in the building and inspired by the Umayyad era mosques. So this is the interior of the Cordoba mosque that I've been showing earlier on. So we have developed a rather large number of schemes over the years, and this is the one that I've been involved in personally. That was now exactly 10 years ago, actually, 2013. And Pristina grew quite a lot after the Kosovo War. So this is about the state in 1995, between 1995 and 98, when the Kosovo War ended and independence was declared. This is how it looked like in 2013. You have kind of growing suburbs with kind of socialist era housing projects. The site of the mosque would be somewhere here, a lot of traffic infrastructure. And the reason why Pristina needed a new mosque is because after years of socialism and then Serbian Orthodox hegemony, there was a large Muslim population, but not really remotely enough buildings to cover their demands. And for those who don't know where Pristina is, it's exactly 1,000 kilometers from here, funny enough, to the southeast in the Balkan. It has a few interesting buildings. So this is kind of brutalism meets space station. It's an 80s building in Pristina, so there have been some quite interesting attempts there. But other than that, in the surroundings of the mosque, that it's kind of at the growing outskirts of the city, a lot of traffic infrastructure. So it's not the first address that you would pick if you would want to move there, but that's where the demand is. It's very similar to Sagrada de Familia. It started in a residential area because that's where people live and need their buildings. The site is it's sloping, actually. It's on a hill. It's first of all kind of connected to all kinds of intersections and pathways that kind of lends itself for pedestrian thoroughfares. And the idea was to make it kind of very open and put it on top of the hill. And the reason for that is that there's a quite interesting additional program here. And it may sound a bit strange, but that's not too atypical. So the mosque here will be placed on top of the hill because part of the program was to integrate, I think, what you would in the West call probably a shopping mall. So a lot of shops, it's almost like a marketplace that is attached to it, and that's not too uncommon. So if you go to the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, which I think opened 3-4 years ago, you entered through an underground thing that is nothing short of the biggest duty-free area that you can imagine in an airport. But in order to keep that separated, we kind of played with the slope of the site a bit. So we want to create one side which is purely dedicated to kind of religious ceremony, and then have a city-facing side which is kind of giving us a lot of life and can attract an audience that doesn't necessarily want to attend for a service. And then what you've seen emerging in Zaha's earlier sketches is the idea of the kind of single minaret that kind of almost disappears in the sky, becomes a very light element, and then forms the building. So not a distinct kind of additive composition, but something that is really fluid and folds itself out of the ground and then disappears. So so in a way, if you put those mosques that I've been showing in sequence, they become ever slimmer and taller and slenderer. It plays with a few elements that you would find in the classical mosque with the cupola, but we use a lot of them, and we use it to kind of almost twist the orientation of the building around. So all of the cupolas have a main opening facing towards Mecca. It gives the room an orientation. So we have to enter through a corner to then enter to the opposite side, which is quite challenging. You want to be right oriented, but it works quite well by allowing to use this almost swarm of cupolas to then reorient the movement from kind of the primary approach direction here, and then the main orientation of the prayer room, which you see in the ground floor plan of the plateau level here, and then also kind of the light gives guidance, and yeah, you kind of can enter opposite the kiba, which is kind of the oriented prayer niche there at the end of the building. And then we have this public thoroughfare, which is a stair, so you can kind of get an idea about the slope of the building. And then we have a lot of the kind of commercial program, like the, let's say, covered marketplace, so to say, at the bottom part, and then a public square that you can use to kind of circumnavigate the entire building on the plateau of the hill. Underneath is a conference center. Interestingly, so it's a bit of a kind of community event center in the level below. You see shops. That's kind of the commercial program that you then access from the lower part of the building, and then parking, more parking, more parking, and even more parking. That's probably something you would do differently today. Yeah, and that's how it looks like in sections. So it's in a way it's a public parking garage with kind of a covered marketplace, and then a mosque on top with 3 different approach directions. Yeah, and that's kind of how it clusters on that hill. This is a view into the main prayer room. It's a bit abstract, but you can maybe imagine how these openings kind of bring light into the space. And the idea was to make it kind of as light and as transparent and as approachable as possible. Yeah, and this is here the approach from the top of the hill, where you have kind of a covered walkway, and you enter the space in a kind of very low and kind of gradually intensifying fashion. And the cluster that is the mosque, this is the approach direction here for attendance to the mosque. This is about 2 floors higher than the main street here, where you then have a multi-story glass facade towards the city, which looks like this. So it's kind of, it looks like a building from above. You see that it's a unifying gesture in architecture, but it has 2 very different functions and phases with which it presents itself to the surroundings, and that's the main thoroughfare. So it's actually working as a neighborhood center, as a marketplace from that side. Yeah, and we had high hopes when submitting it. It was an anonymous competition, though, 100 participants, so that's quite the lottery. I mean, I gather there are a lot of architects here, so you will know how rare your chances are. We didn't make it. Quite interestingly, what was picked is this here, and kind of gets us directly back to this one. Interesting decision at the point of time. So I think there's always a kind of conservative part in the community that kind of pulls in one direction, and then there are also ambitious, kind of mostly younger people who try to bring in influences from abroad. There were a lot of great, kind of very avant-garde designs in the competition, and I think a version of this design is now under construction there. But as we're talking about unbuilt projects, that's the very nature of it, and we will keep trying and hopefully eventually get to do one. So we are working on a study for one at the moment, and yeah, as I said, there shall be no end to experimentation, and it may eventually happen. Thank you.